8 years, and I've taught at a range of vocational and university institutions. And yes, my doctoral research was in TVET online. And so the ideas that I'm sharing with you today, they're from best practice research, but they're also from my own experience. And that experience is really important because I know what it's like to be suddenly thrown into online education. 8 years ago, I was living in Indonesia and I was asked to move the course that I was teaching. I was asked to move that online really suddenly. And I'd not taught online before. And where I was in Indonesia, I had very little access to technology. And at the exact same time that was happening, as a coincidence, I had just started doing a master's degree in how to teach online. So it was something that I was really interested in. And really interestingly, I was studying that degree online. So I was experiencing life as a fully online student, living a long way away from my university. And I was studying how to teach online while teaching online. So my entry into online education was not very gentle. I dove headfirst into the ocean that is teaching and learning online. And it's those experiences and lessons that I've looked to when I thought about what foundation messages would I share with you today. The shift to teaching online has been really sudden this year for a lot of teachers, and everyone's done amazing work to quickly learn new skills. But because that shift was so sudden, some teachers, they didn't get time to stop and think about some of the important foundation concepts. So you're sitting alone in this room all by yourself, just talking to a camera. So to help me out, it's really helpful if you can also participate. So even something as simple as putting a yes in the chat box, it helps me know that you're here. It helps me know that I'm not talking to myself. So if maybe everyone could just start right now, just type something, anything into the chat box so that I know I'm not by myself in this room and that you're all ready to participate. It would be great to see some comments in the chat box. Thank you so much. Okay, now instead of only using the chat box though, because I know some people don't like to use the chat box, today we're also going to use a link to a live polling. Now I'm going to put that link in the chat box so you can just click on it. You do not need any special software. You do not need to download anything to use Poll Everywhere. All you need to do is in your browser, put this link. Now I've popped that link into the chat box ready for you to click. And there you'll see a question, and together we're going to create a word cloud. Now this is just our introductory exercise. You're going to use this very same link another 2 times today. So keep it open in the background once you've given your answer. Now let's see what answers you've got that are coming in. I'm switching across to that word cloud now. And I can't wait to see what you think in one word. What is the characteristic of a great teacher? And our first answer has come in. Somebody has said patient. And I agree. That is so true. Passion, definitely. You have to be passionate as an educator. Cool, definitely. I agree with your word there. What other words have we got coming in? Everybody's very quiet. Knowledgeable. It does help if we know our content knowledge. Students can tell when we're faking it, can't they? Okay. Empathy. Definitely, we have to have empathy for our students and their experience and empathy for their learning goals. We have to be smart with our time as well as with how we go about doing things. And creativity is always really important. I love these words you're coming up with today. Thank you so much for sharing. And what's really interesting is I've asked you what's a characteristic of a great teacher. I didn't ask you what's the characteristic of a great online teacher, because at the end of the day, those important characteristics are the same. Whether we're teaching face-to-face or we're teaching online, our students need us to have empathy, to have passion, to have knowledge, to be creative, to be smart, to be patient. They need all that, whether we're teaching in a classroom or online. Thank you so much for participating. Back to my PowerPoint. So let's dive on into part one, where we're going to break 5 myths about teaching online. So some people think that teaching online is easy. All you do is you get your classroom resources and you load them up. But we know that's not true. Teaching online is definitely not easier, but nor should it be harder. So the key is to always prioritize good teaching practices and then think about how the technology can support what you know is a good teaching practice. And I encourage you not to be daunted or put off by teaching online. This year, I've worked personally one-on-one with more than 100 individual educators, and many of them tell me that once they get over the initial shock and struggles and challenges of teaching online, that shifting to teach online has been one of the best things that's happened to their teaching. Because what's happening is it's forced us to reconnect with our ideas about what good teaching looks like for them. And the shift to teaching online has helped some teachers break out of some bad habits that they'd fallen into, not intentionally, but just out of habit. And an absolutely critical point to remember is that teaching with technology is very different from teaching students how to use technology. And so it's always really important that we think about what we're teaching, the best way to teach it, and then how we can make sure those digital tools support us. Okay, myth number 2. This is something people say a lot, that online teaching, it lacks depth and quality. And again, it's simply not true. The introduction of technology in our teaching, it can actually result in increased engagement for many students, because students can now engage with their learning materials anytime, anywhere, and those materials can be a lot more interesting and engaging. And so we have to promote deep, authentic learning opportunities online, and that's actually easier than a lot of people think. A lot of people are overthinking how we do this online teaching. The other thing about teaching online or learning online is it sort of supports the development of future-ready students, because now students from many, many backgrounds are benefiting from being able to navigate websites, from engaging with videos online and participating in discussions, and being able to communicate through technology is a really important skill in the modern world. And online education, it helps overcome inequities. And so for some students, it's increasing their accessibility. And because we're using a lot more videos, it means that content is being watched, it's being heard, it's being read, and students can revisit topics again and again. And so there are sometimes, depending on what topic you're teaching, sometimes we can do things online that are actually more engaging and more interesting than what we could do in a traditional classroom. All right, ready for myth number 3, and that is that best practice teaching online is there isn't actually a single version of best practice, and nor should there be. There cannot be a one-size-fits-all model of good technology, of online education. And so while it's important that we take inspiration from good practice, so look at what your colleagues are doing, come to seminars and workshops like this that make the strategies your own, because you as a teacher, you're unique. Nobody else has your teaching style. Nobody else has your exact knowledge, and nobody else has your experience. And there's nobody else teaching your topic right now to your students. And your students are unique. So while there are always foundations of good online education, you have to contextualize them for your situation. So best practice, it's what makes sense for you, for your learners, and for the technology that you have available. I often see these best practice guides, but they're assuming that everybody has really high-end technology, the teachers and the students, and that also that the teachers have a lot of time available to set up that fancy technology. And that brings us to our fourth myth, and this one's really important because some educators and people in the sector, they think that all of their learning content has to be perfect, that it has to be filmed in a studio, that it has to be really high quality and use a lot of extravagant technology. And it's not true. So whenever you're consider using a new tool, always stop and think, it might be fancy, it might be extravagant, but does it help me be a better teacher? Does it help my students learn better? So I always recommend that teachers don't need the latest toys. It's important to know what's out there. It's important to know what's possible, but only embrace the technologies and the pedagogies that make sense for you, that make sense for your learners. Because unnecessary technology, it can be really distracting for your students, and it can be really time consuming for you and for them. So always think, what is the best way for my students to learn this? And then find the technology that you have available, that use it in a way that will support you and will support them. And so sometimes instead of getting new technology, it's using a tool you already have in new ways. And making your own videos, it's a key skill for educators these days. But there's got to be a difference between videos that you're making to be used again and again and again, so a little bit better quality, and videos that are just a quick 30-second selfie video to quickly get a message out to your students. Those ones don't have to be quite so high quality. And that brings us to our last myth, number 5. And this one's really interesting. And that myth is that technology replaces the educator. And this is such an interesting myth because what's happened as technology's gotten introduced to education, some teachers at first resist it because they think the technology is going to replace them. But then as the teacher gets more confident with technology and they start to understand it, they realize that technology can actually help us become more efficient and it can help us do interesting things for our students. But what accidentally happens? The teacher starts stepping back. They start letting the technology be at the forefront. They start letting the technology displace them as being present. And so then students start experiencing technology first and the educator sitting in the background. And that's a real problem because students really need an active, authentic, highly present teacher. And so this is a really critical message, is the one thing that students can't get from technology is you. You're the key ingredient. And students really need to know that there's a real human with real experience who cares about their education and is involved in their education. And spontaneous learning conversations with you and with other students, those are the rich learning experiences. And so highly formulated education where everything is sort of arm's length, where you put everything online and then you disappear, that doesn't help anyone. And so it's really important to humanize yourself. So that means being present and being your real teacher self, having your real teacher personality shine through so students can get to know you and each other. So those are our 5 myths. And I'm really curious, which ones of those are you most interested in helping break? And I've set up a new poll there. It's the same link as before. And I'm curious, which one of these do you most think needs breaking or do you most want to help break? So just follow that poll. The link is still sitting there in the chat box, and I'm really curious to see what answers you come in with. Let me just switch across so you can see as those answers come in. There we go. So our first answer is in. Somebody wants to break that there's one version of best practice. I'm so excited to hear that you want to break that one. That technology displaces the educator, that we have to use extravagant technology. So we've got a little bit of a race here on these bottom ones. Excellent. Thank you so much for giving me that feedback and participating. So isn't it interesting that two that are sort of popular at the moment, that there's one version of best practice and that technology can displace the educator role, something we mustn't let happen. That's brilliant. Thank you so much for participating. Best practice is winning the day. Okay, I'll switch back to my PowerPoint. Thank you very much. And that brings us to our second element. And I know that I was asked to prepare some really practical strategies, things that you can do right now in your online teaching. Now, before I get started into these 6 practical strategies, a couple of important points. The first, I'm going to give you an overview of these 6 strategies, but each one of them is normally a 1-hour workshop all by itself. So I'm only going to give you the really basic ideas here today. But the good news is these strategies, they've been proven to work for all sorts of learning topics. So they've been proven to work in TVET and in university, for engineering subjects, for practical subjects, and for theoretical subjects. And so all of these strategies are designed to work in really simple ways with minimal technology. So all these strategies are about the smartphone. You don't need a fancy studio and you don't need expensive software. So let's dive on in to those 6 practical strategies. The first one is clarity and structure. And students of all ages are saying the same thing, that one of the reasons they're struggling to learn online is because there's not enough structure. They need much more explicit instructions and expectations than what they need in the classroom. Now, you don't want to confuse them with really long pages of instructions and lots of things. You need to get to the point much quicker online. You need to make it really easy for them to understand what's expected and where to go. And so they need structure when they log on to look at the learning materials. There needs to be a logical menu so they can find the different materials in the order that they need to find them. And so it's great if you can to have a huge start here button or folder or something so that students know the very first time they log into your course to start right here. And not only does this help students know where to begin, but at a subconscious level, you've started building their trust very early on. They'll start to believe very quickly, my teacher, my lecturer gets it. They're here for me. They're going to take care of me. I can see exactly what I need to do, and this is going to be okay. So students really want to know what to do, when to do it, or in what order to do it, and how you want it done. So if you're asking them to do something, you have to tell them with what tools and to what standard and in what format, and are they doing it by themselves or with somebody else, and do you want them to think about this in terms of just conceptual, or do you want them to actually think about their real world and their life experience and what's going on? So you have to be really explicit, because in the classroom, you communicate a lot of information with your physical presence. And so you have to consciously think all these things that you communicated just through body language and tone and the examples you had. You need to do that online in a much more conscious way. The second really important strategy to implement when we're teaching online and this is so good for you and it's really good for your students, is to pre-record your content, because students love being able to watch videos back in their own time. So you might need them to watch video 1, then 2, then 3, but as the course goes on, they can choose whether they need to revisit video number 1 again, because they might have forgotten something important in there. And they love being able to revisit their favorite videos, or if they've forgotten how to do something. And you don't need a fancy studio to create great videos. You need a very good plan. You need to know exactly what it is you want to say or what you want to communicate. A smartphone works really well. You'd be amazed what content you can do. I always, and you probably already have this, I always have a selfie stick with a tripod, because that means if I'm demonstrating something, you can put it back in, set your phone up on different angles. And I also have one of these. It's a little monkey grip, and so you probably have one of these as well. So these are not high technologies. This is literally a monkey grip. What I can do is I can wrap it around a pole or from a tree, and it means that I can create little videos with just my smartphone in a whole lot of different places. So I can actually go see people at different workplaces and create quick videos, or I can go to different locations. I don't need this studio. I'm very lucky. I have a big green screen studio in my house, but this is what I do for a living, so it makes sense. But when I was teaching in Asia, I didn't have any of that. It was my smartphone and my selfie stick. That was it. So the other guideline, a really important guideline when you're creating pre-recorded content, is that every video should be less than 10 minutes. 10 minutes should be the longest video you ever do. 5 minutes is perfect. So what we're trying to do there by giving ourselves a guideline of 10 minutes is to give students the concept in small pieces. We can't talk for an hour like we would on video, like we would in a classroom. Students online, they get different types of fatigue, and so you want the video in small pieces. Then also, if they do need to revisit a concept, they can just go to visit video number 3, because they've only got 5 minutes to look for that thing that they wanted to know. Whereas if you've recorded a 2-hour lecture, they're not going to go back and look for that bit of information they need, because they're not going to want to go back and forth to try and find the right moment in the video. The other thing with 10-minute videos, it helps your file sizes stay smaller. And so that's really important when your students are streaming or downloading from different locations. And short videos are easier for you, because it's actually easier to plan your critical message. And so keeping your video short, thinking, right, I've got to get this message done in 5 minutes, it helps you stay on topic, and it helps you get right to the facts of what do they really need to know. Now, videos are really important, especially when you're doing practical things, so you're demonstrating practical tasks. People worry that it can be hard to demonstrate something in under 10 minutes. Especially with complex tasks. But there's a trick. For a single topic that has a bit of complexity, you might need to actually make 4 videos, and let me explain why. The first video would be the introduction. So this is explaining to your students why they need to know this, how this is relevant to them. We always want to make sure it's related to what they need. The reason I'm making these videos on this topic, you need this. This is relevant to you. So we relate it to their experiences, their needs. And it's a great opportunity for you to tell a story as well, to be engaging, to engage them with the topic. So what happened the first time you learned this skill, or the first time you had to do this practical task in the workplace? So relatable, very human stories help students get comfortable with the topic that you're talking about or you're about to demonstrate. Now, your second video would be your main demonstration. So we show students all the way through the task, and we make sure that we think aloud or reason aloud. So if you're the one doing the demonstration, you've set your smartphone up so that you can see what you're doing. Don't just do the task. Actually do everything in pieces and think, right, as I pick this thing up, what I'm looking for is, or as I go to cut this, design this, think about that. What I'm doing is making sure this thing is out of the way. So you're telling them all those little things that you're thinking about in between each step. And then it's sometimes really helpful to have a third video, and this is common mistakes. And so it's really important that your demonstration, because your video number 2 was a lovely demonstration, and so they see how it should go, but it's really important that they get the message that things can go wrong and things will go wrong, and that's okay, because the first time you do this, it will probably go wrong. And so there's one message you might incorporate, which is many people find this goes wrong, and that's okay. To fix it, you do what done. So you're telling them it's okay if yours goes wrong, and this is how you'll fix it. And this is a common thing that happens. Another thing is maybe we don't want to let them go wrong because maybe it's not safe, or it will really be a problem. So many people find this goes wrong, and that's a real problem. To avoid it, you need to make sure. And so you're dealing with the fact that there will be problems. And then sometimes it's nice to have a fourth video. It's not always needed, but sometimes it's really helpful to demonstrate that skill or that idea or that knowledge in different contexts. So maybe you'll do the same thing, but this time use different tools or different materials, or apply that skill in a slightly different way. And so you can see now why we're saying the videos need to be only 5 or 10 minutes long, because we're breaking them up into pieces. And so if we joined all of that together in a single video, it'd be too long to stream, too long to download. Students would switch off and go and have a cup of tea instead of listening to the whole thing. And then the other thing that will happen when they need to revisit those common mistakes that go wrong, they won't be able to find it in a really big video. Whereas if the common mistakes are in video number 3, very easy for them to go back and watch it. And what we've learned is that students are more likely to go back and watch videos when it's distributed like this. So always be conversational in your videos. Teachers do not want to see a TV presenter. They want to see a real person with real personality and your unique teaching style. So don't script your videos. I would carefully plan your talking points, but you don't want to sound like you're reading off a script. And you usually don't need fancy editing software. Editing videos is really time consuming. So be kind to yourself, do things in 1 or 2 takes, and just get it done and keep moving. Okay, so our third practical strategy, let's talk about live classes. Because of timetabling and internet restrictions, not everyone has the opportunity to present live classes. But if you do, if you can do live classes, there's a few guidelines that we've learned about that can help you. So what's really interesting is we've learned from students from all over that they don't like coming to a live class online to watch you give standard instruction. And so students don't like coming online to a live class to hear a lecture, because those standard, just normal instructional content, they want in the pre-recorded video. What's important in live classes is that you think about what can be done live that can't be done in pre-recorded content. So students need and they want your live sessions to be more interactive, and they want your live sessions to be responsive to their needs and their questions at that moment in time. And so it's a great strategy is to let students interview you. They love taking control a little bit, which can be fun for them. But it's actually helpful when you let them run the questioning. It can be really helpful for you to then understand the kinds of things they're curious about, and you can leverage that. And the kind of questions they're asking can help you learn how you could make your resources better next time so that those questions are addressed. So it's really nice to know what they're curious about. Students can tell you some of the challenges they've had practicing the thing that you've demonstrated and get real-time advice and feedback. So that's what we use live classes for. We plan our live classes to be in 10-minute pieces as well. So again, having that mindset of each piece being only 10 minutes. It helps you plan your class. It helps you be really purposeful. And for each section, think, how is this benefiting my students? And what's really interesting, and I think the lesson that teachers are really struggling with, because it's hard to feel comfortable with this, is that it's okay to be quiet. When you're teaching online, you don't have to fill the space the whole time. And so what I get teachers to do and what students really appreciate is some quiet time to actually try something out, to think about something, to work on something. So to have a few minutes of quiet time for them to make notes and digest what's just been talked about and to go find information or to think about how this relates to them. Quiet time is okay in live classes. It can be hard for you to sit there sometimes and stay quiet because you feel like you should be moving or doing something. But when you think about it in a real face-to-face classroom situation, we often stay quiet and just walk around the room as students work on something. And so we have to get comfortable in just staying quiet and letting them just work on something without feeling like we have to fill the space. Okay, number 4 out of 6 strategies. We are more than halfway there now. So a really powerful strategy is getting students to record themselves doing a task or practicing new things. Now, a guideline here is that if you want your students to make a recording, you need to model for them what it is you want them to do. So you have to show them an example of what you're asking them. So what do you expect for duration? How long is the recording? What style, to what standard, using what materials? If you're asking them to record themselves doing a practical task, are they really doing it or are they just simulating it? So you've got to think about what it is you want from them. Then you model it. You show them an example so that then they know exactly what you're doing, what you want from them. And what you want from them is to talk aloud while they do that task. You want them saying out loud what they're doing, why they're doing it, what they're thinking about, what they're looking for, what they're unsure about. So I'm doing that thing that you've asked me to demonstrate that I can do. And this is the bit I get unsure of. So I think I'm going to take this piece and do that. That's what you want from your students. You want them feeling comfortable to talk aloud through those steps in their recording back to you. And the great thing about students recording themselves is that these videos are an amazing learning tool. So we get them to share those videos with each other and to review each other's attempts. And so the key to success here, though, is really important. It's all on you. Is you have to create a safe learning environment. And when I mean safe, I mean that it feels safe, that it's okay to make a mistake. It's okay to show my work and it not be perfect. It's okay. Nobody's going to laugh at me. So you need to create the environment where students don't laugh at each other's attempts, but are actually really supportive of each other. And we could talk about how to do that all day, but you know in yourself how important that is and what's going to work well with your students. But it's really important. And what you can do with those videos is get students to notice things about each other's work. And one of the strategies we use here is called 2 stars and a wish. So that means you get students making 3 comments. 2 comments are a star. What do they think was great about that video or that example that the other student filmed themselves doing? And the 3rd comment is a wish. I wish next time the person would do this. So we're not criticizing. We're just saying, maybe they could think of this next time. So you have to model the language so that students talk to each other in a really encouraging way. And the 3rd thing you can do with students when you get them videoing themselves is get them to work in pairs offline and in their own time. And this is really powerful. You can do so much here with compare and contrast activities. The options here are endless, so get really creative. So for example, in their own time, get two students separately, because they're, probably living in separate places, in their own time, and do the same task under two different conditions. So they talk to each other and say, well, I'll do it under this condition, you do it under that condition. And then they watch each other, and then they work together to share their observations or their lessons learned, and they report back. And so think about the really interesting things you can do with compare and contrast and peer review, and students recording themselves doing something and being comfortable sharing that. It's really powerful and one of the most creative things you can do, and you're getting students very active in their learning. And students struggle with this a little bit for the first one because they're a bit nervous. So make sure the very first time you do it, it's something little, something that doesn't matter if the, and that it's okay. So make it really soft, a very soft start, and then go for a bigger activity. And that brings us to our sixth practical strategy to teach well online with the resources you have. And this one is super easy, and I call it the homework table. Students love this. And so in the last 12 weeks, I've had this implemented with a lot of different teachers across a lot of different disciplines in many different institutions. So this has been something that's been a real proactive strategy that we've implemented recently. So I've been doing it a really long time. We've just had it go a bit bigger over the last 12 weeks. And so what's happening in online learning is that we know this, that students feel isolated and alone, and they miss the spontaneous conversations, and they miss those learning moments that happen when they're walking between classes, when they're having lunch, when they're sharing ideas in class. And the other thing that's happening online is that the written tasks and some certain tasks are really boring when you're doing them by yourself. So students don't work on them, or if they get stuck and don't know what to do, they stop working on them because it's easier to stop and give up rather than ask for help. And so we don't want this. What we want is for our students to feel connected. And there's lots of ways to do that. And the homework table is one of the ways. So what happens in the normal learning week is you set aside 1 or 2 hours as a set time slot. And you invite all the students to join a group call at that time. And they bring their homework. And they often bring a snack as well. So sometimes it can be a lunch break, sometimes it can be an afternoon break. And they individually and quietly work on their assignments, but they've got an open group call happening, sitting there. So while they're quietly working, they will then just spontaneously speak up and say, I'm on question number 3. Does anybody else know what to do here? I'm stuck. Or I've had this great idea, or, did you see that? And they spontaneously talk, and then they'll be quiet for a while, and then they'll talk a bit more. And so what's happening is we're seeing is that students are actually working on their assignments rather than putting them off. And the second thing is students are talking freely, and they're talking about the work. And so they're getting that deeper engagement. They're talking about the thing they tried and the thing that didn't work and they were confused about. Now, you're there as well, but you sort of sit back a little bit. So you're there if needed. So to answer questions, clarify confusions, and that helps you learn where you can change your learning materials to help students next time. I do this myself all the time, and I just quietly do my own work, and I just listen, and when they need me, I'm right there. And so you'll find that the homework table's really popular, especially if they start make it very social and casual. They bring a snack, and everybody's working independently but together. So we're seeing a lot of really good things happening in that space. So of those 6 strategies, I'm really curious to know which you think you might try. So some of these you're probably already doing, but I'm curious to know, do you think you might try doing more of these or trying some of these? Now, as I said, each of those topics is, can be a 1-hour workshop all by itself. So I've just given you a little bit of the highlights here today just to get your ideas flowing. I'd love some feedback using the same link as before of which one of these you think you might implement or do more of or experiment with. So let me jump across to there and let's see what you're saying. Okay, so we're getting some feedback that somebody is going to try chunking their pre-recorded content, not doing lectures in live classes. Your students will be so happy. Peer sharing and reviewing. I'm so excited that you're going to try that, and I would love some feedback. You're welcome to stay in touch with me and let me know how these strategies go. I always do like to hear how things are going, so do let me know. The pre-recorded content is getting a lot of attention. This is interesting. That's great. Okay, I'm so glad that we talked about pre-recorded content today because there is more to it than just sitting down to record a great big thing. And I think you'll find if you do the shorter videos, they're easier to plan as well. And you'll be surprised that what you used to talk about in a 2-hour lecture can suddenly be done in just a few 5-minute videos. It's amazing how much filler we used to put in live face-to-face classes. We can sometimes be more direct and efficient, but also really engaging when we're teaching online. Oh, I'm so glad that you've liked some of those ideas. Thank you so much for participating and giving me that feedback. As I said, you're welcome to stay in touch and let me know how those go for you as you start to implement them. Be great. Okay, I'll jump back to the PowerPoint. Okay, so to finish up our session today, we're going to talk about very, very quickly the number one success factor when you're teaching online, and you've probably already guessed it. It is you. You are what students want and need, not the technology, you. You are the key to student success. There's a lot of factors that go into good online learning experiences, but you are the number one difference. They want you to be present. They want you to be human. They do not want a TV presenter. They do not want an avatar that looks like this. They want your face. They want to see your facial expressions, your personality. So make sure you introduce yourself. Imagine if I was just a disembodied voice at the start of the course that said, "Hi, I'm Dr. Denise Cox and I'm really approachable," is very different to a video that says, "Hi, I'm really approachable." Students are much more likely to engage when they're seeing your face animated in a video. It helps students feel comfortable contacting you and it helps them build trust. There's been a lot of research done about how much trust is built in real facial expressions, which is why avatars, we don't use them, and why still photographs are not as good as video for your students. So embrace your unique teacher identity. There is nobody else in the world that has had your journey, that has learned things the way you've learned them. So you are a very unique educator, and I call this your teaching superpower. It's really important that when we move to teaching online, that we don't lose our teacher identity and we don't lose our superpower. So, and I think that's probably one of the biggest things that I've seen happen this year is that when teachers shifted to online because it was so sudden and so different and it was really quite a difficult time in the world, their actual teacher identity got left behind a little bit. So make sure you bring that with you online. Now, that's been a really long session so far. Thank you so much for staying with me. We went through the fact about the 5 myths. So we know that teaching online can and should be great. We know that technology should not replace us as educators. And I introduced you at an introductory, just touched on a few key points there about those 6 practical strategies that you can start embracing. And the number one success factor is you. So I've said that many, many times today. Hopefully you've taken on board and realised how important you are to the educational journey of your students. So what does all that mean? It means that technology is not the boss. Even though you're teaching online, you are in charge. So good teaching first, and then make technology work for you. Technology should never be in control about how you teach something. It should always be purposeful and it should support you. So don't chase extravagant technology just because it's the latest thing. Students often want familiar tools used in new ways. And so my final message today is this. Don't be worried about teaching online. You have teaching strengths. You know what makes a great teacher. We started off with things like passion and knowledge and empathy. Technology and everything else, that's learnable. So don't be put off by the bumpy transition this year. There was a lot happening in the world. So don't let that jade how you look at teaching online. It should and can be a great thing. On my website, there are some free resources, and there's an interview series with 10 interviews with some great online educators, and that's a free interview series you can get at the website. I'm going to stop talking now and let you ask some questions. Thank you so much, though, for being with me through this session. I think we've got 10 minutes. I'm ready for those questions. Please be kind. I'm reading the chat box window now if you want to type anything in.
Dr. Denise, thank you for the incredible sharing just now. You helped us to debunk the common myths surrounding online teaching and learning. I particularly liked how you actually highlighted the importance of structure. This is something I personally advocate to lecturers as well. If you have a lesson plan, because when you're teaching online, you can't just wing it. You really need to plan what's going to happen the first 10 minutes, what's going to happen after that, so you need that structure. We also love the pre-recorded content part where you actually highlighted what should be in the video. I think this is a common question lecturers have. So, okay, I need to do a video, but, how? And thank you for giving those valuable tips where you mentioned about, why is it important? I think that's very crucial because students need to know how it's actually related to their life, this concept, for example, and how the main demo goes and what are the common mistakes. And this is also will encourage students to become better problem solvers, especially when you're given them, the common problems or mistakes that can happen. And that's really crucial. I also really like the way you mentioned that, how this knowledge or this skill can be actually put in different contexts. So let's say you do not have this tool at home, for example, in the pandemic now. So why not use this as an alternative? I think that's really cool. And how you mentioned that, lecturers should be more conversational in their teaching and learning and not, reading from text. And really wonderful tips over there. So let's look at the chat. And then we have some questions. I think the most popular question is, what software are you using, that enables you to actually put the screen, your PowerPoint screen at the back? I think that's what everybody wants to know.
So I think you have to show your green screen or something without everything in.
Yeah, if you could just show us how you set up your home studio.
Sure. I've actually just put a link in the chat box there. I've just given you a link. I've actually made a video that explains how I do this. And the good news is the software I use is free. So I use this free open source software to do all of this. And I've just put that video, a link to that video. It's a video that's sitting on YouTube that I've made because I always get this question. So you can follow that video.
Oh, sorry. All right, Dr. Denise, I also like the particular point you mentioned about the quiet time. I think quiet time would be suitable for us to give group tasks to students. And so there's a question here. Is it okay to put background music during quiet time?
Yes, it's actually a really nice thing to do because it signals to the students that that's what we're doing. And what my students do is they vote for what they want to play, and it makes it interactive. It helps students like to feel like they have a little bit of control over their learning. And so even just little things about them competing for who gets to choose the song that we're playing during quiet time today, I can make that. I shouldn't say this, don't tell my students. I can make them do all sorts of things to win that competition. Like they do their homework because they want that control. And so to get them to participate, we start with small things like competing for control over the song, and then we get them building up to then do more deeper participation. But they don't sometimes like being visible, like you guys in the chat box today, which is why I use polling, because it's anonymous. Sometimes gradually I build them up to deeper or more engagement.
Thank you for that tip, Denise. The next question is how to teach non-responsive students when doing online class. For example, if we ask questions to students, but students do not give response to us, how do we handle these students?
That's a fantastic question, and one every teacher experiences. And so it's one of the reasons why I promote actually telling students that today's class, you're running it. I will only talk when you ask me a question. And you have to be, it feels like you have to be brave, because I have to tell you, I've been doing this a long time. And even when I'm logging on to a 1-hour call, when I have nothing prepared, thinking, gosh, if they don't ask me a question, I'm in trouble here. But by getting them to ask the questions. Now, if that's not working, because sometimes they start quietly, I always have a backup plan. Now, what that backup plan is an example. So it could be an example assignment that a student from last year did, or it could be a video of somebody else. And so I get them to watch it, engage with it, click on it, do something with it, and you tell me what's wrong. You tell me what's right. And so get them to dissect somebody else's work. It sometimes feels a bit safer for them.
That's an incredible tip there. Okay, another question. What is the best teaching online approach that can be applied for subjects related to handling machinery, that needs physical attendees? So these are the hands-on aspects of the technical vocational education training background.
That can be really difficult because your online student doesn't have access to that machinery in their home or in where they live. And so that's where the videos become really important. And now make sure they're small videos. So sometimes you'll take a video naming the components, and it's really good then for students to actually do something about naming the components back. Now, there's some software called 3D Vista. And now I always say keep it simple. I know that. But when it comes to certain machinery learning, you do need something a little interactive. So what 3D Vista is, it's not very expensive. There are much more high-end expensive versions. This is a nice little cheap one. It'll take your photograph and it turns it into an interactive experience. So what you can build it, and it's very quick, is that photograph students can move in there, just by moving their mouse, and they can click on that item. Now, I work with the oil and gas industry a lot, and we do that. So there's a thing called a blowout preventer. So we give them a picture of that and they click on each piece and some information comes up about it. And then for their exam, they click on a piece and have to answer a question. So 3D Vista is a way of taking normal photographs and making them interactive. And it's the cheapest one I've found. If anyone finds a cheaper one, let me know. But machinery that students don't have access to is probably the most challenging thing. That's why videos and getting them to talk and reason and simulate. So sometimes what I've done in the past as well, like I said, I've done quite a lot in the oil and gas industry, is I'll stand next to the machine. You tell me what you want me to do. I'm not going to do anything unless you tell. So you want me to put my hand on that lever? Okay. Are you sure? Okay. I'm going to do. You want me to pressure it up? Okay. You're telling me to pressure it up to 500 psi. Okay. And they do that. Now, again, depending on the equipment, there's a level of bravery involved there the very first time that you do that. But that's one way of doing a cheap simulation without having, even using 3D Vista. That's a one way of doing a cheap simulation, just using smartphones, because I'm a really big fan of not building expensive equipment that is soon out of date, because you want next year for that machine to be different. So that's why I like things like that. So that's one way. It's not as good as them getting their hands on it, but it's helpful.
So you suggest to take still photos, and in the hotspots we do the labeling of the content. Very good. Thank you very much. Another last question, because it's already 10:02. What is your opinion in order to identify students, the weaker students? How would you identify them when you're teaching online?
I could talk about that for a whole day. So very quickly, I do a thing called, it's called self-selected differentiation. Now, seriously, we could talk about this all day, but very, very quickly, what it means is I put activities in the online area, and I don't give them the whole activity. I just give them maybe the first minute or the first page. So it could be 4 videos, it could be 4 pages, 4 things to read. It depends on what you're teaching, but 4 versions. And one is the version for students who are beginners or having problems, and the 4th version is for very advanced. Now, I don't tell them that it's beginner to advanced. I just say, everybody read page 1 of all 4 things. The rest is locked. Or everybody watch the first minute of all 4. And then you tell me which activity you want to do. And so I like to then do a group activity. So you self-select which group you're in, because they will self-select for the level they're at. They'll self-select for their knowledge, for their interest, and what's going on for them. And they have then grouped themselves into learning groups. Now, I've done this in a lot of different institutions. It takes a lot of work to build, because you have to think about your 4 levels. But oh my goodness, that self-selected differentiation is probably one of the most amazing things you can do with students. And if you're going to keep teaching online, it can sometimes be a good way when students first enroll for the very first time. You can do an activity like this to find out what they need to know as their orientation, because you don't want your advanced student having to go, this is a mouse. We don't want that, because they will switch off. So yeah, that would be a very quick answer to a very complicated thing.
All right, Dr. Denise, I think, our attendees out there, we believe this has been a very valuable sharing session. Thank you so much. We have learned so much. Before we adjourn, because we have the live award ceremony starting in only less than half an hour, I would humbly request everyone, please fill in the feedback form, which is available on time.